Hello, today we're going to talk about the ABCs of game productions. There's no freaking way I can condense the 36 years of my game experience into 15 minutes. All right, so I'm really trying to fit in 15 minutes. So let me start. So it's going to be very high level. If you're from game industry, skip the whole video. You don't need this. But if you're from Web3, you have not done Web 2 game development before, this is good. And also, if you are an aspiring student, you would like to learn more about video game productions, stick around. So it's gonna be a good 15 minutes. 14 minutes now. Okay, so first. Let's start with development team. What's in a video game development team? So when you run into people who says they're from game companies, ask them what games have they shipped. Many of them never shipped any game before. Then they say which game. Then you ask them what did you work on that team. So there are a few things that are important in a game production team. The first one is programmer. Not that they're the most important, it's not. It's just, I was a programmer, so I put it on top. The second one is artist. I'm sorry, let me go back. Programmers, there's client programmer, server programmer. You could have a programmer just focusing on shader. I mean, that could be complicated enough. And if you get specialized, especially when you get down to hardware, if you need to optimize something, then you may have some very specialized programmer. I'm not gonna get into detail, but for example, I came from the era 80s, 90s, so I'm a client programmer. We did not have servers back then, so my strength is in the graphic display, gameplay, input, output, calculation, user interface, so on and so forth. What's required in a classic video game, but I know nothing about server. I know a lot about protocol. It's just because I ran a company doing middleware for network. Anyway, I'm digressing. All right, so artists. You have 2D illustrators, you have user interface artists, you have 3D modelers, you have texture artists, you have animators. Some companies are so specialized, even rigging for the bones and the model, what polygon is connected to what bone. They'll have a special guy just for that. That's when you have a lot of workload, and also if your studio is big enough. And I'm obviously skipping something. So there's potentially a type of person. I think some companies call it art tech. So that person is between artist and programmer. He could be an artist who can code. Or something else. All right, the next one is game designer. So game designer depends on what kind of games, what genre the game's in. The game designer will be very different. So some game designer are very narrative driven. And obviously that would be for adventure game, that sort of stuff. Like Street Fighters type game. Everything happens in the moment. It's all about moment-to-moment gameplay. So the game designer will have to be a very intuitive person. It's all about, holding the joystick and feel it. Yoshiki Okamoto, my senpai, he is exactly that way. He wants me to shut up, just let him play. Action games, there's that, and then RPG also has a lot of scripts, but when it comes to game balance, that's something else. So anyway, game designer, it's deep. We can spend many 15 minutes on just game designer alone. The next one is level designer. Level designer is a subset of game designer. However, level designer can be very deep too, because if you get a chance, if you have not played Monument Valley, check it out. Dan, one of the principals from that project at us too, because I licensed that game into Chinese market. He told me he doesn't think anyone can design the levels in that game, and I would agree with him. You almost have to be on drugs to be able to design levels for Monument Valley. All right, the next one is sound designer. And then there's obviously background music, sound effects, you know, songs, whatnot. That used to be super important. I think it should still be important, but it's usually an afterthought in most of the video game productions these days. And the last one is testers. Everything I talked about here, well, not everything, the subject of the things I talk about here, I'm going to leave it in the description so you guys can, I guess, study this video a little better. The next segment is I'm going to talk about development process. There are many stages in a video game production. The first stage is called pre-production. Some people call it design phase. There's actually a difference between design phase and pre-production, but I'm not gonna get into that. Let's just say as a whole, before we start the game production, that stage where we're figuring out what game we're trying to make, that's called pre-production. And Hollywood has similar practice. And it's high concept. It's figuring out what you're trying to make and how are you going to pitch it to people, so to get you funding, to get you support, so you can finish the game. And you need a lot of concept art, and you need a lot of. Some people hired storybook artists. I've done that before. So you talk about, what's the visual you would like to see, and this guy can very quickly do it with pencils. This is also the stage where you have to finish GDD and TDD. GDD is game design document. TDD is technical design document. It's a good practice to get these two done. And back in the old days at EA, we had a thing called media design. It's basically art design document. So you get all the three major video game production principles to each produce their own how document. So basically they need to explain, how are we building this game? What are the components and where are the high risks? And we usually try to get the high risks task done, because you don't want to finish 99% of the game. You realize the final 1% cannot be done. That would be really unfortunate. So you need to do I would like to do the hardest one up front. And that's because I was a programmer. So I always assume the technical risk is the worst. I could be wrong, but that's my bias. So that's it. Let me quickly run it down. During the pre-production, you want to do high concept, pitch deck if you're pitching it to your investor or to the company. And then you have your concept you need to finish. It's potentially the same thing. GDD, game design document. TDD, technical design document. And Google around, you can find templates. And then media design. And in media design, the artist, our lead artist, needs to sort of settle what style, and in some cases, what palette you're going to be using. But primarily, what style, what's the atmosphere, and how are you going to produce the art. And and by the way, in TDD, GDD, the biggest thing is if you do them well, you do them right, you'll figure out how to build the game, how many people you will need, and how long would it take. That would be the natural outcome if you finish it, if you finish those documents well. Okay, the next one is prototype. It's part of pre-production because this is not the actual production. So this is just to show an idea. Why is this game can be fun? How is it viable? And what's it look like? How does it feel? So it's just a really rough, high level concept. We throw away the code from prototype most of the time. Sometimes the art, everything, just because we have to hack it, get it done really quick. And it's okay to use prototyping tools during the prototype. What am I talking about? Yeah, prototyping tools for a demo or prototype. All right. So now we're in production stage. the first meaningful milestone is called the first playable. It's the first time people were working with you on the team. You know, don't think everyone on the game production project, they know exactly what game they're building, because everyone is just building a piece. So when you have milestones together, you can put everything together and you're interacting with the game. That's a really big morale boost for the entire team. So sometimes that demo, that milestone, is not for outside people, it's for internal people, because they just work on their piece and they haven't seen the whole picture for a very long time. So this is important, first playable. And then the next one, you know, we call it alpha. I talked about alpha. You could have 8 bucks, but you know, it's have all features, feature complete. And it could crash, but you know, if you play it right, you don't do anything too stressful to the game. You can finish the game. And then between alpha and beta, you have a stage. We call it code freeze, meaning don't touch the code anymore. In fact, how we used to make the games, you know, we put it on the CD. There's a way we do not incorporate new game code anymore. So we just change art and change some data files, but so when we have a code freeze, we can really freeze the code. Like we just don't take, you know, you can keep working on bug fixes or whatnot, but we're just not taking it for the final production disk, final version. It's not that important these days, just because we don't use CDs and you can easily modify it, update anyway. But for the first public release, you should have a code freeze so that you don't have to look at source code or technical part in flux, art in flux, game design in flux, sound in flux, everything is in flux. You will go nuts as a producer. So it's nice to lock and load the program inside. So, okay, no major bugs. Okay, don't touch that. And then you work on art, you work on sound and the other stuff. All right, the next one is beta. Beta, similar to alpha, except it's ready for prime time. So no crash bugs. Crash bugs in QA, just don't take my word for it, do your own research. There should not be no 8 bugs in beta. If you have 8 bugs, you get kicked out of beta. You address it, then you go back to beta. And then there's closed beta, open beta, and you know, every console or every hardware will have its own naming convention. And then people still use the term gold master, meaning it's done and ready. Get it out of the door. In general, that's the development team and development process. And listening to this video is not going to turn you from a person who has never made a game before to where you can make a game now. It's not. But this will give you a very high level, overview of what do you need, what kind of people do you need to put a game production team together. You have to go through what kind of milestones to get a game shipped, but the details is deep. Depends on different genres that you're making. Look, I had a Japanese best friend. He's a game designer, and his strength was trivia games, and he knew everything about trivia games, about people's attention, when would they lose interest, and every game genre we have to respect. Every game genre has its own audience, and the game designers have their own expertise too. So anyway, I just want to talk about, this is not the Holy Grail. This is not the Bible for everything. No, it's obviously possible to make games other way. In the early days, I wrote the code, I make the art, I do the sound, I designed the package, I wrote the user manual, everything by myself. I rode my motorcycle to different places and begged them to publish my game. So now this is just more scientific and more sort of you spread out your risk. All right, so the last few seconds. All right, so this is the quadruple constraint for game production. We'll talk about this next time in the next episode.